Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Why No One Plays. Heading back into the jungle to talk about a champion that is honestly not too bad, but it's just another one of those average champions. Vi, the Piltover Enforcer. I actually used to main her back in Season 6 and 7 when I queued up as jungle secondary, but then I realized if you queued up mid secondary, you had almost a 0% chance of ever getting off-rolled as a top main, so little pro tip for you guys. Anyway, in terms of the diver subclass, Vi is the most ideal representation of what they should be. Long-range engage and someone who likes to brawl it out head-on in the middle of everything. All things considered, she's not that bad at doing that too. Why No One Plays features champions with average play rates consistently under 5%. Throughout the past 5 years, Vi has stayed around the 2 to 3 percentile, so she's not that obscure of a pick, but you don't reliably see her either. She used to be much more popular prior to Season 6, to the point where you might say she was top tier in the meta. Divers at the moment are one of the most kicked subclasses due to their ability to start fights, in a time period where much of the community believes being the aggressor is more beneficial. Whenever you think of divers with long-range gap closes, you picture Jarvan IV, Hecarim, and Vi. These champions can dash from like 2 screens away and get all up in your faces. Among her peers, Vi is well known for her ability to select one target and lock them down, regardless of who it is. This trait makes her really popular to use as a counter pick whenever there's someone on the enemy team that might be problematic. But unlike other Why No One Plays champions, she meets a lot of the criteria that popular champions would as well. Good engage, decent solo carry potential, and is more or less pretty fun to play and easy to pick up. You'll notice I often talk about champions that come really close to being widely popular but fall short by just a little bit due to missing some element that would round out their playstyle very much. And in her case, it would be that she has only 75% of everything a diver needs. The more disheartening part is that all of those things she's 75% good at desperately need the remaining 25% to be effective. One of the most counterintuitive things about Vi is that she has some of the best long-range lockdown in the entire game, but absolutely no stick potential on top of her short attack range. Even though she's arguably the best diver at bolting straight towards the backline, all it takes to get her off her target is a quick stun or knockup and she's gonna get kited for the rest of the fight. All divers do relatively the same thing, but how they accomplish their mission is through one of 2 ways. The first is by hitting them hard and fast. Renekton, Diana, and Rek'Sai to name a few, these champions bring the hurt right at the start with much of their damage being front-loaded. It's not uncommon for them to be able to blow up 1, 2, 3, even 4 people at the same time. The second way is by chasing down their opponents as they're scattering, Wukong, Hecarim, and Irelia. They don't possess the most amount of front-loaded damage, but their high mobility and DPS make it so you don't have a choice but to fight because you're not going nowhere. Vi lacks both the hard burst damage and rushdown of her peers. Fortunately for her, she got a buff midway through last season that lowered her Q cooldown at max rank from 8 seconds to 6, which is a big deal because she usually has about 30% CDR, meaning she goes from 5.6 seconds to 4.2. Assuming she has to use both Q and ultimate just to close the distance, she only needs to wait about 2 seconds before her Q comes back off cooldown. That being said, 2 seconds is still more than enough time for Tristana to slam you with Buster Shot or Janna to use Howling Gale and Monsoon to keep you off. A lot can happen in 2 seconds to buy time for them to get away from her. Nothing in her kit inflicts a slow, nor does she gain bonus movement speed in any way, shape, or form. This would be really nice to have on her since literally every other diver has extra movement speed or a slowing effect. Also, since she has 125 attack range and not 175, it's a lot easier to cancel your auto attacks on her if you're spamming right click on the person. As for her damage, it's not bad per se. A full charge Q does 310 plus 140% bonus AD. Her W passive does a huge chunk of percent health damage, and she synergizes really well with Spellblade due to Excessive Force being 2 auto attack resets on demand with pretty solid scaling. She can hit with the force of 1,000 suns as much as any other diver. It's just not really the bursty type since she has to apply it over the course of a lot of hits. Reason being, Denting Blows is a 3-hit passive. There are tons of champions with 3-hit passives in the game where you hit someone 3 times for extra damage and usually some other effect. As I mentioned, Vi's W does a solid chunk of percent health damage. Usually by the mid game it's going to do somewhere between 10 to 15% if you counter bonus AD. It also reduces the target's armor by 20%, which is great to have. Finally, she gets a nice boost to her attack speed so she can ideally proc more denting blows faster. It also makes her shield come off cooldown faster. Vi does get a lot out of landing her 3-hit passive, but there's a bit of a problem here. All other champions with 3-hit passives are designed to be able to easily apply that passive several times over regardless of what the enemy is doing, running away or attacking you. For instance, Echo's Z-Drive Resonance does insane amounts of damage, up to 140 base plus 80% ability power. This thing's gonna be doing like 500 damage on proc in the mid to late game. All he has to do is EQ auto, and if he ever does need to proc it again, he gets a massive movement speed boost for a long time, which allows him to stick to his target. While running away, he just throws Q after Q and gets free passive procs. Vayne has no problem with her silver bolts because she gets bonus movement speed when running towards enemies and she's a ranged champion. When being chased on, she can kite with her Q to put distance, so she applies her 3-hit passive with no issue whether running or chasing. Same with the new Akshan. He procs his 3-hit passive so easily since he has to only attack twice thanks to his double shot, or if he cancels the second auto, he gets bonus movement speed. Vi is the only one who can't easily activate her passive when chasing and has zero way of activating it when running away. Where I'm getting at with this is that Vi's playstyle is that of a brawler. She fights a lot like Jax and Olaf who rush at you and beat you down with hit after hit. Her rather consistent DPS and status as an anti-carry makes her really damn good in head-on confrontations because she can duel a lot of carry junglers like Lee Sin, Hecarim, and Kayn. She's also notoriously strong against Master Yi, but she can only really put out her full strength if her opponent is willing to fight her to the death. Against champions who like to kite you out like Graves, Lilia, and Kindred, you have no way to stay close to them outside of Vault Breaker. It's a cool twist of irony that a champion with so much lockdown potential can neither burst nor rush down her targets if they manage to survive past the initial engage. In the mid-game that may not happen, but once champions start to scale, get more health, more healing, more shields, and durability, she's really gonna struggle to one-shot the way Diana or Camille can. Another problem Vi has is that she has long casting animations, and those do not get faster as she scales. This is a recurring issue among champions that fall off in the late game. They tend to have at least one ability that will always take X amount of time to use and it doesn't improve in speed, whereas everything else does. Her Q also holds a huge amount of her burst damage, so if she misses it, there goes a lot of power. Usually, people don't think about slow or fast attacks as much in League of Legends because damage doesn't cause the enemy to flinch the way it does in fighting games. That and most cast times are only a quarter second long. You guys know how when you're in game and you use an ability, there's that blue meter that fills up? Easy way to see it is on champions with attacks that have long delays before striking, like Mordekaiser Q or Jarvan Q. That is what cast time is. So when we talk about a champion being clunky, we're not referring to attack speed or movement speed, we're referring to cast time. Yasuo and Yone are a special case because they have cast times that decrease with the purchase of attack speed. Yasuo's Q, Yone's Q, and W. Vi's ultimate, Assault and Battery, is a fantastic lockdown ability because it's got long range and is point and click. A 1.25 second knockup is certainly a very long time, except Vi herself is also locked in place for like 3/4 of a second, meaning you only get to actually make use of half a second worth of that knockup by yourself. It's the same issue Renekton has where he stuns himself with his W, although he can use active items during that time. Vault Breaker can dash up to 715 units, which isn't half bad for a free targeted dash, but it does require you to charge it for at least a second and a quarter to get both the full damage and range, during which Vi is slowed by 15%, which by extension reduces the maximum range from like 715 to maybe 600. No matter what stage of the game you're at, she has to wait the full 1.25 seconds to get all of her damage. I'm not saying you always have to fully charge Q to use it, but it really sucks that it doesn't shorten based on level. To her credit, Vault Breaker uses her own collider as the hitbox in a similar fashion to Sejuani's Arctic Assault or Gragas' Body Slam, and since it has an initial dash range of 250, she's really good at interrupting champions like Rengar, Zac, or Rek'Sai because she can instantly press Q as they come towards her or her team to disrupt them. That's not the issue though. Vault Breaker is notoriously easy to miss. Vi's collider has a radius of only 65 units. That's a diameter of 130. If we compare this to Sejuani and Gragas' 160, it's a lot smaller. As I also mentioned before, if you want a max range, max power Q, you have to wind it up for over a second. That gives the enemy a heads up that you're about to go after them so they can try to change up their movement to make it easier for you to miss. Sejuani and Gragas dash immediately. Missing Q is such a heavy punishment for Vi, especially in the early game, because not only is it a lot of damage, but also a denting blows proc that you desperately need for the bonus attack speed, percent health damage, and armor shred. Landing Vault Breaker is just as critical for Vi's pressure as landing Dark Binding is for Morgana. It's an extremely powerful ability when it lands, but that's more if it lands. It would be one thing if it was an instant dash, but say you're playing Vi into Graves or Kindred and you start charging up your Q. All they have to do is wait for you to let it rip and they can effortlessly sidestep it with their dash. Alternatively, if you're up against someone with fast hard crowd control like Nunu who also has frame 1 hard CC in the form of Snowball, you are permanently at a disadvantage because, once again, you have to charge your Q, which gives them plenty of time to wait for you to dash straight towards them and you get a taste of your own medicine. It can be frustrating to play Vi when so much of your damage is locked behind an ability that is really easy to see coming, which makes it easy to dodge or block. I honestly think they can remove the 15% slow from her Q and even that wouldn't make a single difference. So despite Vi having amazing gap closers, the attacks themselves can be rather clunky. Her last issue is that of her strangely poor team fighting. I talked about it earlier that Vi has neither the burst damage nor stick potential like most of her peers, but she's also almost strictly a single target attacker. Each of her abilities has the possibility to strike multiple enemies, but it's not very consistent when you consider the need to proc denting blows on each one individually. In other words, she's good at skirmishing but not the best at team fighting. I often like to compare her to J4 since both of them have long range engage, but the main contrast between the two is that J4 has far more AoE damage in exchange for less DPS. Dragon Strike can easily hit multiple targets and apply a better armor reduction debuff than Denting Blows does, and honestly comparable damage to Vault Breaker too. Cataclysm damages everyone caught in the arena, so this guy has a much more meaty frontal assault, while Vi can box for a lot longer after engaging. As you know though, the past few years greatly favored bursty champions or machine gunners and not so much sluggish beatdown champions. On the other hand, this is a skirmish heavy meta which Vi does excel at, so she's not particularly weak either. Her bad team fighting does get remedied somewhat through her build path. In a similar fashion to Jarvan, Vi has multiple paths for itemization. If there are other teammates who can engage along with her, you can probably get away with building some more damage. If she's the only person going in, you can elect for a more durable build to survive the engage while your teammates do the carrying. Playing Vi efficiently and effectively requires a really solid fundamental understanding of the game since for the most part she's a stat stick champion in the same fashion as Garen or Dr. Mundo. That means you need to really know if you have the damage and durability to win 2v2s, 3v3s, and team fights. Interestingly, Vi as a jungler has very 50-50 pros and cons. She has a fast and healthy clear, enough power and resilience to secure Dragon and Rift Herald without getting too low, and is able to itemize either Bruiser or Full Burst whenever needed. In exchange, she's weak as hell if she misses her Q, relies heavily on her team to dive in with her since she has the lockdown but not really the damage to finish the job, and not only falls off in the late game but can be punished really easily in the early game. Overall, Vi has all the tools required to be successful, yet you as the player are forced to manage these resources to the best of your ability. Also, these resources more often than not force you to be vulnerable yourself, so even though Vi has many playstyles applicable to her, the combination of all the traits above make her a fundamentals-oriented character most of the time. So what can be done to fix her without making her outright overpowered? Now this is of course my opinion. I think they should revert her mini rework. In patch 9.5, Vi got a lot of changes to her kit that aimed to make her less burst oriented and more of a sustained fighter. While this did give her a small boost in popularity for a couple months, I think this is actually the wrong way to go. Between burst divers and rushdown divers, Vi is most certainly the former. She doesn't have the same kind of tempo the way Hecarim does because she needs to focus on building damage and durability, whereas Hecarim gets stronger just by moving faster. In exchange for losing a ton of AD ratios, Vi's blast shield got 50% stronger, and her denting blows would lower the shield cooldown by 3 seconds each time. I'm not sure if Vi mains agree with me on this, but I think this rework is what really damaged her potential to become popular again. It's the cause of literally every problem I talked about in this video. Before, Vi would usually have enough burst damage to outright one-shot squishy targets. She would probably die right after, but it was a working gimmick. Now, she's a lot scrappier, but no longer has the numbers to do enough damage on her primary engage, which is where the bulk of her damage is. Sure, building full assassin on a champion with point-and-click long-range knockup sounds like hacks, but at least she was good at something. At the moment though, she's not really that great at anything. That's my thoughts at least. If you enjoyed the video, a rating would be much appreciated. Don't forget to sub to the channel for more content like this. Consider following me on my socials and joining my Discord server if you'd like. Lastly, check out my previous Why No One Plays videos if you haven't yet. But thanks so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. Take care.